What's the juiciest secret you know? Story 1. We had a doctor working with us for a charity who was incredibly nice and friendly. Kids absolutely adored him. He was extraordinarily patient. Once a patient threw something at him and he dodged it, ending up lying in a puddle of the patient's urine. He laughed about it afterward, even as he quietly cleaned up with the nurse. That's another thing. I've never seen a doctor do that before. He never got angry. Even if a patient did something frustrating or foolish, he remained calm. Until one day, when a particular patient came in. She had been stabbed by her husband. Another doctor had tried to close the wound earlier, but her family wasn't interested in proper care until she started to deteriorate. They lied to us initially. The doctor took one look at the wound and in a chillingly quiet voice said, "Don't lie." It wasn't funny. It was terrifying. That's all he said. But the way he said it made it clear he wouldn't tolerate dishonesty. You know that fear you had as a child when your dad was disappointed in you? That's what it felt like. No shouting, just an overwhelming presence. One of the family members pulled a coconut knife and swung it at him. I didn't even see him move, but he snatched the knife mid-swing, completely unfazed. He scrubbed up and repaired a small nick in her intestine. Then he called the police and testified against the family, despite their threats. Afterward, he offered the woman a job to help her gain independence. She eventually divorced her husband and left her family. Throughout it all, the doctor never raised his voice. I've seen him change clothes in private, away from everyone else. His body is covered in scars, and he has a Latin tattoo that reads something like, "In arduis fidelis." I've never met a doctor with so many scars. He speaks Arabic, too. I've seen him sit with Muslim patients and help them read the Quran. Even though we always had so much work, he found time to connect with patients. He might not be the smartest doctor, but he's definitely the kindest. People think he's harmless because he's so soft-spoken. They laugh at him sometimes because he flinches at the sound of fireworks or popping balloons. I don't think they realize he lets them get away with it, probably because he doesn't want to cause a scene. But this is the same man who didn't blink when someone swung a knife at him. Story 2. 2 weeks before my daughter's wedding, I discovered that my husband had been having an affair for over 5 years. He had a heart attack while out of town on business. It turned out that the stranger who saved his life by calling 911 was his mistress. After the heart attack, he told me he was impotent and couldn't take medication for it because of his heart condition. I believed him. When you're not a liar, you tend to believe what you're told. We'd been married for over 20 years, so I accepted that our relationship would shift to companionship instead of romance. In sickness and in health. When I found out about the affair, I confronted him. At first he tried to lie, but eventually he confessed. Suddenly, so many things made sense. The unexplained absences, the deleted phone calls and text messages. Looking back, I realized how oblivious I'd been. We agreed to stay together until after the holidays for the sake of our kids and grandkids. 2 months later, he had a massive stroke. Now I'm caring for a paralyzed man with brain damage. He cries and begs me not to leave him or tell our children about the affair. Story 3. My friend's wife bought him a PlayStation 4 and Battlefront for Christmas, even though she had sworn she'd never support his gaming. The next time I see him, I'm just going to walk up and say, "You're welcome." But let me tell you a real story. The summer after I graduated high school, my group of friends and I went camping at a campground where one of the guy's family had a permanent trailer. We went every year. This year was different because the girls joined us for the first time. And since we were all 18, no parents came along. There was a creek nearby that was really popular for tubing, and we'd float down it almost every day. Later in the week, I think it was Thursday, the girls decided they didn't want to join us. So we went tubing without them, just having a good time. Eventually, a storm started brewing on the horizon, and the water's speed picked up. We kept an eye on the storm, but didn't think too much of it. Then a military-looking man on the creek side called out to us. He asked if we'd seen his daughter and her friend. He described them, and we all said no, but promised to keep an eye out as he continued searching upstream. About 5 minutes later, we heard laughing and thrashing from the opposite bank in the brush. At first it sounded normal, but then I thought I heard muffled screams. Curiosity got the better of me, so I convinced the others to check it out. We landed and quietly approached the source of the noise. What we found was horrifying. The 2 girls being searched for were there, being assaulted by 2 drunk men while a third was filming. We immediately rushed in. My friend wrestled one of them while I used my martial arts training to deal with the others. They stopped fighting back and ran off quickly. My friend managed to grab the camera before they escaped. We escorted the crying girls back to their father at the camp, handed him the camera without saying a word, and left. Later, two of the attackers' bodies were found beaten and hanged in the woods about a mile from camp. We all knew who was responsible, but the girls never learned the full story. Artist Fury, Story 4. The ex-vice president of Nigeria accepted a bribe through a planned fertilizer factory in Bayelsa State. The ex-minister of finance, Aganga, did the same. He was notoriously sloppy, often drunk and willing to agree to anything as long as he was intoxicated in London. He was eventually demoted to a minor role, like Minister of Labor or Infrastructure, essentially a made-up position. Frank Nwake, the ex-minister of propaganda, hosted all internal meetings in his Mayfair apartment. Obasanjo was also tangentially involved. 5 companies, including Uday and Saipem, were bidding on the project. They were all told they would receive gas allocations from Dr. Ike of the parastatal, allocations equal to Nigeria's entire natural gas production, plus a planned expansion of 5 to 10% if they greased the wheels. All the companies paid bribes just before the election, which relied on dirty money to pay the military to suppress the North and ensure a PDP victory. This led to a very dirty war. Around 2,000 people died, many executed through the brutal practice of necklacing with tires. The dream was to produce fertilizer for Nigeria that could have supplied 25% of Africa's needs. Instead, corruption turned it into a deadly political disaster. Story 5. My grandfather killed his friend. He was Mexican and came from rural Mexico to work legally in the U.S. during the 1960s and 1970s. Like many others, he worked in agriculture and made some very close friends over the years. He would be away from his family for half a year or more before returning home. After finishing one work season, he traveled back to Mexico with a longtime friend. They had just crossed the border into Mexico and were walking along a dirt path alone when his friend suddenly pulled out a knife and tried to stab him. My grandfather managed to dodge the attack, and they ended up fighting, rolling on the ground. He fought for his life and, in the struggle, managed to stab his friend. It turned out his friend had planned to rob him of the money he was bringing back to his family. That's why he tried to kill him. My grandfather left the body somewhere only he knew and returned home. He never told my grandmother what happened. For years, he was haunted by nightmares and visions of the man he had killed. He felt guilty for not giving him a proper burial. Eventually, he went back toward the border, found the body, and gave it a proper burial. He said the nightmares stopped after that. Although he never regretted it, knowing he had acted in self-defense, he only told 2 people, my mother and me. My grandmother had no idea, and she never will, as my grandfather passed away a few years ago. Story 6. I have an open secret that not enough reporters seem to talk about. A significant number of Republicans and Republican organizations have taken money from the Moonies, a church Harshcharn cult with ties to North Korea that has literally sold weapons to the regime. Joe Biden's son was also involved in shady business dealings with one of Reverend Moon's sons-in-law. Reverend Moon, the cult leader, passed away about 2 years ago. The son-in-law in question was married to Tatiana, her Americanized name, the leader of the American branch of the church. However, Tatiana and her husband eventually divorced after she cheated on him with a member of her church's band, a man widely known as Hot Band Dad. She even had a secret baby with him, and the birth certificate leaked online. Tatiana's ex-husband was later prosecuted for questionable business practices involving millions in unexplained mystery money. Speaking of that money, millions of dollars in mystery funds have propped up church operations, shady dealings involving Joe Biden's son, and Republican politicians. The Moonies were prosecuted in Japan for exploiting widows by cheating them out of their life savings and pensions. Almost all members tithe at least 10% of their income, and in the 1970s and 1980s, many lived in vans, destitute, giving everything they earned to the church. My dad was one of them. He lived like that for 7 years, crammed into a van with 4 or more people, surviving on almost nothing while the church took it all. Story 7. My friend Jess has been with her boyfriend for almost 5 years. He's a complete scumbag, useless at pretty much everything. He comes from a rich family that funds his lifestyle, taking him on vacations and giving him money for no reason. Jess has been head over heels for him since they got together, but things have gotten worse as she's gained some weight. He's grown increasingly cruel, doing things like going to parties without inviting her, going out to dinner with his family and leaving her at home, and letting his druggy friends crash on their couch, which is actually her couch since she's the primary breadwinner. Early on in their relationship, I heard from another friend, Becky, that she hooked up with Jess's boyfriend at a party. She told me they kissed, and he let her perform oral on him. I've debated for a long time whether I should tell Jess. Becky told me in confidence, so I couldn't tell Jess without revealing who it was or her demanding to know the details. Jess is completely unaware, and it's heartbreaking because she constantly talks about how great her boyfriend is. I cringe every time she says it. A lot of it seems like wishful thinking. She has to know deep down that he's terrible. I've tried to point out his behavior before, but she always brushes it off. What makes it worse is that she said to me, I would trust boyfriend with my life. I know he would never cheat on me. If she ever found out about this, it would destroy her. Poor, clueless Jess. Story 8. Several of the restaurants I've worked at over the years have been propped up with mob money. At some places, it was kept under wraps. At others, it was more casual, like someone joking in the middle of a dining room full of customers. Oops, we let a case of foie gras go bad in the fridge. Time to call in some of that Coke money. There's also a Vietnamese restaurant in my town that I'm 90% sure is a front for human trafficking. It's directly across the street from a Vietnamese travel agency, and our town has a little Saigon area. One night, while driving home from work around 2 a.m., I saw two buses filled with young Southeast Asian women parked outside the restaurant. It was a cold winter night, yet not a single one of them had a jacket, scarf, or even a purse. None of them were using phones, iPods, or any kind of device. It didn't feel right, so I called the Polaris Project when I got home. I don't know if anything ever came of it. I've since switched jobs and don't drive past that area at night anymore. But I'll never forget what I saw that night. Story 9. About 25 years ago, two friends of mine, Rob and Ariel, started dating. Their relationship eventually became serious. One evening during a party, they both got drunk. In his stupor, Rob confessed to me that Ariel had a bestiality fetish and had been intimate with his family's two huskies. When they sobered up, neither of them mentioned the conversation, so I acted like it never happened. A year or two later, Rob and Ariel moved in together. Not long after, they adopted two male huskies. About a year later, they got married. Around 10 years ago, they started having marital problems and eventually divorced. A year after their split, Rob got sick and passed away. Ariel moved to a new home with the dogs, and we lost touch. 5 years ago, I heard that Ariel had remarried to a man who runs an animal shelter. Story 10. A few years ago, a good friend of mine, who's married, my girlfriend and I went to a strip club. That night's feature performer was Brie Olson. This was shortly after Charlie Sheen's infamous goddess phase, so it seemed like she was trying to make ends meet. After her show, she started offering private lap dances for about $150. My married friend decided to give it a try. My girlfriend jokingly bet me a blowjob that Brie Olson would end up doing more than just a lap dance. I took the bet. After all, she was a famous porn star. Surely she wouldn't be hooking up with random guys at a strip club for that price, right? While my girlfriend was in the bathroom, my friend casually sat down next to me and said, "So I just fed Brie Olson." I nearly spat out my beer. I asked him to explain, and he did, every detail. We both agreed to never tell anyone this story. Naturally, as soon as my girlfriend got back, I informed her that I'd won the bet and claimed my reward. So at least we both got lucky that night. Now with all the news about Charlie Sheen's HIV diagnosis, I'm tempted to give my friend a heads up. He's not someone who follows celebrity gossip, and this might be something he'd want to know. Story 11. A friend got really drunk one night and confessed something horrifying. He told me that 3 years earlier, he had raped the sister of another friend of ours while she was blackout drunk at a party. Apparently, he was buzzed but not too drunk to know what he was doing. Afterwards, she filed a police report and had a rape kit done, but there was no match in the system. About a month after the party, we learned she was pregnant. She decided to keep the baby, and her family and friends, including me, did everything we could to support her. Everyone except the guy who got her pregnant, that is. I was so furious when I heard his confession that I knocked him out cold. Then I called another friend of ours, and it took half an hour to convince him not to kill the guy. While he was still unconscious, I swabbed his mouth with a Q-tip and secretly had a paternity test done. About a month and a half later, the results came back positive. My friend and his parents took the results to the police. That guy is now in prison, where he's reportedly being assaulted just as he deserves. I figured I should finish this secret with the aftermath. Story 12. When I was 15, my parents split up, though they never officially divorced. My dad moved out and stopped contributing financially to the household. My mom didn't have a job, so things became difficult quickly. To help out, I started working for a friend's dad, who let me work under the radar. After school, during my freshman year of high school, I'd work from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. When I'd get home late, my mom assumed I was just out with friends and not following her rules. She'd get mad, and for 2 years, my sisters and mom often called me lazy, a failure, and good for nothing, despite my efforts to keep up with school and work. They didn't suspect anything about the bills because they thought my dad was still covering them. I was the one who always took the bills out of the mailbox, keeping them from realizing the truth. Even though I worked hard to keep the lights on and food on the table, I never told them. I struggled with nearly failing school every year, but I never let them know the sacrifices I made. To this day, I've never told my family what I did, and I don't think I ever will. Story 13. I was with a girl for over 10 years, and we had a wonderful son together. For the most part, we were a happy family. When my son was 8, we broke up. It was an ugly breakup, and my son was devastated when his mom moved out. We were separated for about a year, during which she started dating a guy who was, to put it mildly, a loser. Even though we weren't together anymore, we kept in touch for the sake of our son. He lived with me but would visit her occasionally. Then she dropped a bombshell. I'm pregnant. She had gotten pregnant by this guy she was seeing, and I was furious. I had always held on to hope that we'd get back together, but this news crushed me. I didn't want anything to do with her anymore. About a month later, the guy she was dating hit her and kicked her out of his car while she was pregnant, leaving her stranded at a movie theater. She called me for help. I was disappointed and angry with her choices, but I couldn't ignore her. I picked her up and brought her home. Even though I was upset, I still loved her. She was the mother of my son. I knew she regretted her decisions, and I started to think about reconciling with her. The biggest obstacle was what everyone else, especially my parents, would think. My son, however, was thrilled at the idea of us getting back together. He missed his mom and wanted her back in our lives. I couldn't turn her away, so we slowly started rebuilding our relationship. We kept it a secret from my parents throughout her pregnancy, and even for a few months after the baby was born. My mom eventually noticed something on Facebook and asked me, "Did her name have another baby?" I tried to dodge the question at first, but my girlfriend kept urging me to come clean. Eventually, I told my parents that yes, we were back together, and yes, she had a baby. My mom, who loves babies, was excited, while my dad was more serious about the situation. What I didn't tell them was that the baby wasn't mine. I'm Hispanic, and the baby's father wasn't white. The baby's complexion was similar to mine, so my parents naturally assumed he was mine. That little detail made keeping the secret easier. At first, I wasn't sure I could accept the baby as my own. I was filled with anger and resentment about the whole situation. But when he was born, something changed. He reminded me so much of my own son, and my son was overjoyed to have a little brother. All my anger melted away. I fell in love with our new family member. I realized that it wasn't the baby's fault, and he deserved the same love and care that my biological son received. Now we're a family again, just with one more member. My parents still believe the baby is mine, and I don't plan on telling them otherwise. He's the sweetest, funniest, most well-behaved 1-year-old, and I love him as much as I love my own son. Looking back, I wonder why I let myself get so stressed. My family feels whole again, and that's all that matters. Story 14. There's this actor, semi-famous. He's had regular roles on TV shows and is married to an actress who's more famous than he is. Recently, he did an interview where he talked about how excited he was to have his first child. The thing is, I know for a fact that he already has a daughter. He had her when he was younger, though he didn't stay with the mother. He's kept in touch with her over the years. I know this because I dated his daughter. She has his last name, even though she doesn't use it publicly. What's strange is that his daughter never kept their relationship a secret, so it's odd that it's not public knowledge. I guess he's just not famous enough for people to dig into details about illegitimate children. Still, I think it's weird, and honestly pretty crappy, for him to publicly call this new baby his first child, knowing his daughter might read that interview. Story 15. I had a best friend. She slipped into a coma due to a tumor and after surgery developed conduction aphasia. Just a couple of weeks before all of this happened, she had visited our hometown, where I still live. We'd been close since freshman year of high school, and we'd always had a bit of a crush on each other. Over time, though, we became best friends. We knew everything about each other. When she came to visit, we ended up sleeping together. It was amazing. If she hadn't moved away, I think we could have been a great couple. We were unexpectedly solely compatible. After she went home, she found out about the tumor. Before her surgery, she told me that if she lost her memory, which she did, I should tell her boyfriend to move on. Now her boyfriend still posts emotional, sappy messages on her Facebook wall, and her parents seem to think that's fine. Her parents are super conservative Christians, and they never liked me because I'm Native American and have long hair. She used to lie to them just to hang out with me. Now she lives only 20 minutes away, but I never see her. She doesn't even remember who I am, and I feel like it's best for me to stay away. It hurts, but I don't know how to face someone who meant so much to me when I don't exist in her memory anymore. Story 16. After our divorce, my ex-husband left behind a pile of junk. Among it, I found some waterproof field journals. One day, I grabbed one to make a grocery list. While thinking of what I needed, I flipped through the journal. It had old notes about guns and military stuff, which wasn't surprising. But further in, I found rough drafts of letters he'd written to family and friends while deployed. One letter was addressed to his cousin, detailing all the Sewell things he wanted to do to her. They were always very close and used to text until 3 a.m. most nights. But I never thought much of it because, well, they're related. Now it makes me wonder about all the other female cousins he would spoil and text until way past midnight. I also know he cheated on his current wife and even tried to kiss me while she was pregnant with his child. Disgusting. Knowing him, there's a good chance he acted on his fantasies with his cousin. I still have that letter. If I ever wanted to, I could ruin his entire life with it, even if nothing actually happened. Story 17. A friend of mine used to run an escort service and got really close to one of his workers. After some time, they started dating. She quit escorting, they got married, and just yesterday, they had their first baby. No one knows about this except for his brother and me, and no one ever will. Speaking of his brother, here's a wild story about them. These two brothers, close in age, were best friends growing up. They skateboarded, caused mischief, and filmed jackass-style pranks and stunts. Nothing too impressive, but it was fun for them. My friend, the one who ran the escort service, let's call him Farquhar, once pulled a prank on his brother John. One day, Farquhar snuck into the bathroom while John was in the shower. John didn't suspect a thing until a string of firecrackers went flying over the shower curtain. At the same time, Farquhar stuck his hand over the curtain and snapped a photo with a disposable camera. The firecrackers went off, Farquhar ran off, and John was furious. That seemed like the end of the story. Months later, Farquhar took the film to get developed and remembered the photo. When he saw it, he realized something horrifying. The photo captured John mid-masturbation, with a wild, intense expression on his face. Farquhar wasn't sure what to do with the photo. Obviously, no one should ever find it. So he put it in an envelope and taped it to the bottom of his TV, thinking it was the safest place. Years later, he came home one day to find his room clean. Shelves dusted, everything neat and tidy. Then he noticed the TV stand. It had been cleaned too. His hiding spot was empty. Farquhar panicked. His family didn't have a maid, so the only explanation was that his mom had found the envelope while cleaning. She never mentioned it, ever. Not to him, not to John, not to their dad. Years later, Farquhar told his dad about it, and his dad just laughed and laughed, finding the whole thing hilarious. Farquhar, however, still cringes every time he thinks about it. Story 18. A family member of mine is involved in politics, and I've picked up on some juicy secrets over the years. Federal prosecutors are often more corrupt than politicians. It's ironic, but federal prosecutors and attorney generals frequently build their careers on convicting politicians, often innocent ones. The justice system in these cases is heavily tilted in their favor. Innocence doesn't matter because their power is unchecked. Everyone fears becoming their next target. How special interests control politicians, lobbyists like the NRA or AIPAC, use a straightforward approach to control politicians. They'll offer a candidate millions in campaign donations, but demand loyalty on specific issues. If the candidate refuses, the lobbyists will back an opponent instead, almost guaranteeing the candidate's loss. Politicians often have no choice but to take the deal. Even if they have their own agenda, they must follow the lobbyists' priorities just to survive in the game. Obama's isolation in politics. Unlike most presidents, Obama didn't have a kitchen cabinet, a close circle of trusted advisors. This left him isolated, with no one in politics he could unconditionally trust. It made his presidency much tougher than people realize, and is something that deserves more respect. Foreign policy blunders and corruption. Most of the major foreign policy disasters over the last 60 years, like claims of Iraq's WMDs or the Vietnam War's fabricated Gulf of Tonkin incident, occurred because of corruption somewhere between the truth on the ground and the intelligence provided to the president. Middlemen distort or manipulate information for personal or political gain, leading to catastrophic decisions. Story 19. I live on a tiny tropical island nation, a former British colony, right on the harbor in the capital. My neighbor was an extremely wealthy old Englishman who had made a fortune mining phosphates, something connected to explosives during World War II. In his later years, he became frail, and the only person who cared for him was his gardener. His children despised him and never visited. My mother, feeling sorry for him, would send me over with soup. He never bothered to learn my name and only called me boy. One day, while in the clutter of his house, I saw a black and white photo of him and a strikingly familiar young woman sitting cozily together at a restaurant. Curious, I asked him who it was, thinking it might be his wife. "Boy," he said, "that's Liz." That's when it hit me. Her face was on the money we used at the time. I realized he was referring to Queen Elizabeth. He offered no further explanation, but the folder I'd seen contained more intimate photos of the two laughing, chatting, and clearly close. I'm fairly certain this man, who passed away decades ago, had a relationship with Queen Elizabeth. Story 20. I had a year-long, semi-relationship with an NFL player. We weren't officially boyfriend and girlfriend, but we went on dates, had a physical relationship, and did typical couple things. Everything was always on his terms, though. He explained that he wanted to keep his personal life private and that his sporadic schedule made it hard to commit. I accepted those reasons at the time. One night, I noticed a text from a girl he claimed was his ex-girlfriend. I didn't read it, but it struck me as odd that they were still communicating. When I confronted him, we fought, and the relationship ended. A few weeks later, I discovered that this ex-girlfriend was actually his fiancée, and they were married just 2 months after our breakup. All along, I had been his side chick without knowing it. Since then, he's faced some tough personal and professional challenges, so I'm cool with letting karma take care of things. Still, it's frustrating to see him celebrated as one of the good guys in the league every time I tune into sports radio or watch a game. If I ever came forward with the truth, it could destroy his career, but I've chosen to let it go. Story 21. I used to work in a deli at a family-owned grocery chain. The business had a reputation for being family-oriented and down-to-earth, but the owners were greedy and treated their employees poorly. There was one customer, a cop, who would always come in about 5 minutes before closing to get a sandwich. Normally, that would irritate me since I liked having everything cleaned up by then, but this guy was nice, so I didn't mind. One night, instead of ordering his usual sandwich, he asked me to walk with him into one of the aisles. The store was nearly empty except for me, a couple of cashiers, and the closing manager. Down the canned goods aisle, he told me he needed to get something off his chest. We had built a good rapport over time, so I guess he trusted me. He also knew how much my co-workers and I resented the owners of the store. He told me about a call he answered a few nights earlier. Something about teenagers messing around in a car under a bridge. When he got there, he found one of the store owners, a married family man, in the car with a young cashier from a different store location. The owner tried to bribe him to keep quiet but didn't even use money. Instead, he offered steaks, lobsters, and whatever you want. The cop turned him down. He asked me if I thought he should tell the owner's wife about what happened. The twist was that the cashier had a fiancée, known for being angry and somewhat violent. The cop even considered knocking on the owner's door and telling his wife, but wasn't sure what to do. After dropping this bombshell, he just said goodbye and walked out. He didn't order a sandwich that night, and I never saw him again. I held on to that information and thought about using it to blackmail the owners into giving me and my coworkers the raises we deserved. In the end, I didn't have the guts. Months later, I quit the job but passed the information along to one of my coworkers. He was a hard-working guy who'd been there for years and never got a significant raise. When I told him, his eyes went wide. Part of me hoped he'd do what I couldn't, use the secret to get some justice. I never found out if he acted on it or not. Story 22. There's a girl in my hometown who has lived with her male best friend for a long time. She's very overweight, and this detail matters to the story. While he's a stereotypical playboy, long blonde hair, good looks, and a drummer in multiple successful bands. I know this secret because during a drunken moment of weakness, the girl confided in a few of her closest friends. She revealed that she and her male roommate had been secretly hooking up for a long time. She's deeply in love with him and wants their relationship to be public, but he's ashamed of her because of her weight. He even told her exactly how much weight she'd need to lose for him to date her openly. If she doesn't meet that figure, he's willing to continue sleeping with her in secret, but nothing more. As if that wasn't bad enough, here's where it gets scandalous. This arrangement went on for a couple of years, during which she got pregnant. She was terrified to tell him and couldn't bring herself to have an abortion. Instead, she decided to keep the pregnancy a secret. Because of her size, she managed to hide the pregnancy entirely. She carried the baby to term, gave birth, and had an adoptive couple lined up, all without anyone knowing. As far as I know, I'm one of a very small handful of people who know this, and I've never told anyone else out of respect for her privacy. Story 23. This isn't exactly a juicy secret, but it's an interesting story. I'm really good at internet stalking. Like crazy good. One day, a friend asked me to look into a guy she liked to see if he'd posted anything that might be a deal breaker. I agreed and things quickly spiraled. Using just his name, I found his Facebook, MySpace, Spotify, LinkedIn, Steam account, and jackpot of all jackpots, his Reddit account. As any good friend would, I combed through his Reddit posts. Most of it was mundane, but I got a sense of his personality and kept going. Then bam, one post stood out. It was a personal anecdote where he mentioned that his older brother had died at a young age, and he had never told anyone about it. I didn't share this with my friend, of course, but it stuck in the back of my mind. Through his Reddit posts, I also learned about some of his insecurities, which influenced how I interacted with him. Over time, we became friends. One night we got drunk and had a deep conversation. Out of nowhere, he opened up and told me about his brother, saying I was the first person he'd ever told. I was sitting there drunk, feeling terrible. I struggled to react genuinely, knowing I'd already read about it. All I could muster was, "Oh God, that's horrible, I'm so sorry." What I really wanted to say was, "Yeah, I know. I found your Reddit account, and I'm so sorry for being such a terrible person." But I knew admitting that would be a gross invasion of privacy and could ruin both our friendship and his relationship with my friend. Since then, I've sworn off internet stalking. Well, aside from quick checks to make sure people aren't serial killers or anything, but no more finding people's Reddit accounts. Lesson learned. Story 24. My cousin's girlfriend's best friend and her friends went to the city for a weekend of partying. One night they were clubbing, and she started hooking up with a guy who was eager to take her home. She declined, saying she was with her friends. After some time, he gave up and left. The next morning, she woke up with a rash on her face and assumed it was just from kissing. But by the following day, it had worsened, so she went to the doctor. The doctor examined her, locked the door, and asked her to explain everything she had done in the last 48 hours, down to the smallest detail. She told him about meeting the guy at the club. The doctor immediately called the police and had her recount everything to them as well. It turned out the rash was caused by a bacterial fungus that grows on dead bodies. The man she had been with was caught, and the authorities discovered he had killed a mother and daughter in his home. He had engaged in horrific acts with their bodies and had planned for her to be his next victim if she had gone home with him. Story 25. I'm related to someone who ran for governor of a province in the Philippines during the 2000s and lost. The election was terrifying, one of the most dangerous in the history of her political dynasty. Armed men roamed the streets, there was a bombing, and goons were working on both sides. She tried to keep her side peaceful, but the chaos was overwhelming. While campaigning, she visited a village where a 12-year-old girl was being kept in a cage and used as a slave. She confronted the girl's father, berating him and demanding he stop it. The father, who supported the opposing side, reluctantly said he'd do something about it. When she returned later, nothing had changed. She explained to me how elections work there. You buy votes by handing out envelopes of money to entire villages. That's just the system. She once joked about secretly recording the corruption and exposing it in a future election, but admitted the political climate had become so dark that only the most ruthless, psychopathic people could win. She knew she couldn't run a campaign like that and had no chance of success. We visited the governor's palace once. It was absurdly opulent, a sprawling area with perpetually lit lampposts and pop music playing, even at 2 a.m. The governor's brother controlled the local electric company, and the governor himself was tied to drug cartels. She described him as an autocratic freak. There are darker stories she told me, but sharing them would make this too identifiable. Let's just say the current regime planted evidence to discredit her family's dynasty and made them look far worse than they were. She also told me about a friend whose father was a governor in another province. He was so notorious that he had dead bodies and decapitated heads in his yard. He even burned down a village. The police and federal government turned a blind eye because of bribes, so eventually someone assassinated him. As an American, hearing these stories felt surreal. Corruption in the Philippines is deeply entrenched, and what you see in the media is often sanitized and far removed from the grim reality. The experience made me realize how hard it is to root out corruption once it becomes systemic. I can only hope U.S. politics never sinks to that level because, from what I've learned, there's a point of no return where fixing the system becomes nearly impossible. Story 26. I have a brother and sister, step-siblings, that I didn't know existed until I was 26 years old. When I came out to my father as gay, I was terrified because he's a strict military officer type. To my surprise, he was completely accepting, supportive, and loving. However, since we were sharing truths, he decided it was time to confess something he'd kept hidden. It turned out that when I was young, my father had started a family with another woman shortly after, or possibly during, his divorce from my mother. That in itself wasn't a big deal. People move on. The real, painful truth was that my mother had made him vow never to tell me about my brother and sister. She had threatened that, if he did, he'd never see me again, essentially weaponizing me against him. My father had always wanted me to meet them, but he honored the agreement to keep seeing me. Since then, I've met my siblings, and we've hit it off incredibly well. Despite growing up apart, we share the same values my father instilled and have many common interests. They're only about 7 years younger than me, so it's easy to connect with them. What hurts the most is knowing how lonely my childhood was. Growing up as an only child, I longed for a brother or sister to share things with or even argue with. My mother was often disinterested in me, and I spent most of my childhood alone in my room, rarely allowed to play downstairs. All that time, she knew I had exactly what I dreamed of, but kept it hidden from me out of spite. The secret now is that I know everything. My mother remains blissfully unaware that the truth has come out and that I've known for years. Maybe it's a little vindictive, but I'm planning to get married soon to my partner of 6 years. I intend to invite everyone, including my siblings and their family, to the wedding. I want to see the look on her face when she realizes her carefully kept secret has unraveled. Story 27. This shouldn't be a secret because it was reported to the police, but nothing ever came of it, so it feels like it's been buried. A co-worker of mine was murdered. He was a hard-working man whose wife had left him with 3 kids to care for. Despite the challenge, he did well raising his kids, but eventually got involved with the wrong crowd. Drugs, partying, and the like. One night at a party, he got into an argument with another man. He left the party, but the man followed him. While driving home on a country road, the other man ran him off the road, resulting in a horrific crash that killed my coworker. Several people at the party witnessed the events leading up to his death and told the local police. However, nothing was ever done. It's a small-town area, and I can't help but wonder if the man responsible had connections. Maybe someone the police knew or protected. Thankfully, the coworker's wife came back to take care of their children. She stepped up as a mother, and they seem to be doing well now. It's heartbreaking, though, because my coworker was a decent, hardworking guy who didn't deserve this. I used to carpool with him since we were neighbors, and I saw firsthand how much he cared for his kids and tried to make the best of his situation. It's sad to think his death might be one of those tragedies that never gets justice. Story 28. One of my close friends is secretly hated by everyone else in our friend group, and she has no idea. They constantly talk behind her back and call her a liar, even though I've never seen any real evidence of her lying. They think she lied about having cancer, despite the fact that she has a visible scar from the surgery and photos of her in the hospital. They think she lied about her job as a professor because they couldn't find her on the school's registry, though I know for a fact they Googled the wrong school. Recently, one of the girls in the group got married and invited her to be part of the wedding party. A week before the wedding, my friend's appendix burst, and she was rushed to the hospital, unable to attend. Everyone else claimed she faked the whole thing because she forgot to buy her bridesmaid dress in time. For her birthday, her parents, who aren't wealthy, bought her a hotel room in New York City and tickets for all of us to attend a football game. It was an incredibly generous gift, but no one showed up. I couldn't go because of health reasons, but when I texted her to ask how it went, she told me she ended up going alone because everyone else bailed. She's genuinely a wonderful person, and it breaks my heart to see how awfully the group treats her, especially since they've been calling her a liar for 6 years. She doesn't understand why everyone's been distant and cold to her since she missed the wedding. I'm torn about whether to tell her what they've been saying or stay out of it. It feels cruel to keep quiet, but at the same time, I don't want to stir up unnecessary drama. The fact that we're all in our late 20s and early 30s makes this petty behavior even worse. It feels like high school all over again. Story 29. 3 years ago, some guys from the neighborhood, known for dealing drugs and violence, started telling everyone they were going to beat up a friend of mine at a party. These weren't empty threats. These guys were notorious for stabbing or beating people half to death. Concerned, I went to my friend and asked if he was planning to go to the party. He replied, "Yeah, why are you asking?" I told him about the threats and he simply said, "I don't really care. John is going to be there." Then he walked away without explaining further. Everyone at our school knew John. He was huge, about 2 meters tall, and had a reputation for being friendly and peaceful. He never fought, so I was confused about why my friend felt so confident. At the party, the guys threatening my friend showed up. Everyone was terrified and didn't dare say anything. Just as they were about to start something, John stepped in. He whispered something to them, and they instantly went pale like they'd seen a ghost. John gestured for them to follow him outside and made a quick phone call. His expression was so terrifying that even I, who wasn't involved, felt scared. Curious, I followed them outside at a safe distance. What I saw shocked me. The guys, who were always threatening and intimidating others, were standing there with their heads down, completely silent. Two black SUVs pulled up, and the guys were thrown into the vehicles, which then sped off. 2 days later, I heard that they were found in the hospital with nearly every bone in their bodies broken. It turns out John is the son of a high-ranking criminal, possibly connected to the mafia, and he considers my friend family. Word quickly spread about what happened, but no one talks about it openly because, despite everything, people still like John. He's the kind of guy you don't mess with, but also don't want to lose as a friend. Story 30. Last year, during my freshman year of college, I lived in a dorm with a close friend, who we'll call Brad. On April Fool's Day, I decided to play a harmless prank on him by dropping a bunch of Tic Tacs through the peephole of his door. It was unscrewed, leaving an open hole. I left a note that said, "I hope this doesn't tick you off." Brad laughed it off and promised he'd get me back with an April Fool's prank the next year. Fast forward to the end of the school year. While moving out, I accidentally left behind a spare backpack I really liked in Brad's room. I didn't have time to grab it in the chaos of moving, so I told him to hold on to it for me over the summer and return it when school started again. When the next semester rolled around, Brad gave me my backpack back, and I started using it daily for books, my laptop, and other school stuff. Meanwhile, Brad and our mutual friends kept teasing me, saying, "You'll never guess what's coming on April Fool's Day. Brad's got massive payback planned." I couldn't figure out what they meant, but it seemed like everyone was in on the joke. Months passed and more people heard about this prank. They kept telling me it was bizarre and that I'd never see it coming. Finally, one of my friends couldn't take it anymore and spilled the secret. Brad had taken my backpack home over the summer and cummed all over it. He came on the outside and the inside of the backpack, then gave it back to me, knowing I'd use it every day. When I looked at the backpack closely, I could see faint white stains on the fabric, both inside and out. Somehow I had never noticed before, and it sickened me to realize I had been carrying that around every day. The worst part, all of my friends knew. They had watched me walk around campus with that backpack and said nothing. Now the secret is that Brad doesn't know I've figured out his prank. I haven't confronted him yet because I want to get my revenge, something equally gross and humiliating. I'm debating whether to piss on his toothbrush, shave off his eyebrow, or come up with something even better. One thing's for sure, this isn't over. Story 31. Two of my best friends from college have a baby they gave up for adoption, and no one knows except one other friend and me. They managed to hide the pregnancy remarkably well. She didn't show much and wore oversized shirts to keep it under wraps. Around the due date, they told their parents they were going away together for a week, conveniently over the holidays when everyone else went home. Instead, they came back to our off-campus house, which we had rented for the year, to wait out the delivery. Their timing was perfect. She went into labor, and he got her to the hospital, which was only 10 minutes away. She delivered a healthy baby boy, but asked not to see him, knowing it would make her want to keep him. He saw the baby once, then they immediately finalized the adoption paperwork. They knew they couldn't take care of him as college seniors. She recovered quickly, had no complications, and they returned to the house before anyone else came back from winter break. By the time we all returned for spring semester, none of us had any idea what had happened. Years later, 9 to be exact, he told me about it over lunch. He started with, "Hey, I have something I need to tell you, and you really can't tell anyone else, okay?" One other friend knew because he had stopped by the house while they were leaving for the hospital, leaving them no choice but to explain. Neither of us ever told anyone, and as far as I know, their families remain completely unaware to this day. Story 32. This will probably get buried, but I had to create an account just to get this off my chest. Up until recently, I was best friends with someone I'd known since age 9. We went through everything together. When I was dealing with an abusive father in middle school, her family even took me in for a while. Her mom became like a second mother to me. For reasons unrelated to this confession, we no longer speak. It's been incredibly hard, but I think it's for the best. Here's the secret. The man she believes to be her dad isn't her biological father. He raised her, but her mom got pregnant during a brief separation from her faux dad. During that time, her mom had an affair with a man she was in love with, but forbidden to be with because of her family's strict old money New England traditions. When her mom realized she was pregnant, she went back to faux dad, who agreed to raise the child as his own. They eventually divorced for good, but no one ever told her the truth. She's almost 31 now and still doesn't know. I found out during college when I lived with her mom and stepdad. One drunken evening, her mom told me the whole story. Even her younger sister knows. I hate that they put this on me because I've carried this weight ever since. To complicate matters further, her faux dad passed away suddenly from cancer last winter. She's been grieving him deeply, not knowing he wasn't her biological father. It tears me apart. I feel like she deserves to know, but it's not my place to tell her, especially now that we don't even speak anymore. Story 33. This probably won't get much attention, but I needed to share it. I used to work as a case manager at a place that electronically monitored people placed on house arrest by the courts. Most of these individuals were serving time for their crimes, but some were in a program called pretrial monitoring. These were people who hadn't been convicted yet, but were considered flight risks during their court proceedings. One of the conditions of house arrest was that individuals could leave their homes for work, but their employer had to be verified. We needed detailed information about their schedule, duties, and workplace. One particular case still haunts me. A man was awaiting trial for molesting minors while employed by the Archdiocese of a major West Coast city. Unsurprisingly, he had been relieved of his duties and found work elsewhere as an independent contractor. He provided all the necessary documentation, so he was permitted to work while under house arrest. I eventually left the company for a better job in a different field. About 3 weeks after I left, I was back at the office for some unrelated reason, and independent contractors' ICs were coming in and out to collect their settlement checks. Suddenly, I saw him. He walked in, and my stomach dropped. It had been less than 2 months since I left the job, and he was still facing those horrifying charges. He spotted me across the busy office, and we locked eyes. I couldn't help but smirk, partly out of disbelief. He nervously acknowledged me with a head nod, then raised his fingers to his lips in a gesture for me to keep quiet, essentially telling me, "Mum's the word." The audacity of that moment has stayed with me. It was as if he thought a little head nod and a shush gesture could erase everything he was accused of. It made my skin crawl, and I can only hope justice eventually caught up with him. Story 34. I'm not sure if it counts as a juicy secret if it's my own, but here it is. While I was at university, I double-timed 2 girls, one local, one international, and to this day, neither of them ever knew about each other. No one else does either. It all started when my relationship with Real Girl began to fall apart. She became emotionally dependent and manipulative, making the relationship unbearable. Around that time, I met International Girl through Tumblr. It started as harmless fun, a few flirty messages for excitement, but soon I developed genuine feelings for her. International Girl lived in another country, so we only communicated through Twitter, text, and Skype. Whenever I was with Real Girl, I muted all my notifications and told International Girl I was out with friends. I created elaborate cover stories about pub crawls, shows, or trips into the city to explain my fragmented replies. Whenever Real Girl left the room, I'd sneak in a few messages to International Girl. I wanted to end things with Real Girl, but it wasn't that simple. The first time I tried to break up with her, she cried so loudly that her housemates came running, accusing me of doing something terrible to her. The second time, while I was already seeing International Girl, she threatened to hurt herself. When I backtracked, she actually did cut herself and proudly showed me the next day. I felt trapped and knew I'd have to wait until uni ended to break free. Meanwhile, I realized I couldn't keep both relationships going. I was falling for International Girl, but I knew it wasn't fair to her. Long distance wasn't sustainable. We couldn't afford to travel, and I hated lying to her about my life. So I decided to do the right thing and slowly ended things with International Girl. Over a month, I became blunt, delayed replies, and acted disinterested. I even brought up an ex and talked about how great she was, hoping to push her away. Eventually, we had a fight after she went out drinking, and the relationship fell apart. It was horrible, but I convinced myself I had done the right thing. As for Real Girl, it didn't last long. 2 months later, she became even more controlling, trying to dictate where I went and who I was with. I finally ended it and got the hell out of that toxic relationship. I never told Real Girl about International Girl, nor did I tell my friends. She was my secret, and she remains so to this day. Now I'm happily single, and International Girl has settled down. I think about her every day and regret how I handled everything. If we ever cross paths again, I'd have to come clean about my lies, and that would ruin any chance of rekindling what we had. I miss her, but I know I made my choices, and now I have to live with them. Ipriuan. Story 35. The ex-husband of the daughter of some family friends turned out to be gay. From what I've heard, their intimate life was a struggle. He could only perform during doggy style, and even then, he needed a cock ring to keep himself aroused. Despite this, they managed to have a child before their marriage eventually ended in divorce. I only met him once, at their wedding, so I don't know him personally. However, I've been told he's an attorney who primarily works for his powerful and connected family. This family dynamic has kept him closeted. His family would react extremely poorly to him coming out, and there's speculation they might even go to extreme lengths to silence him, given how much he knows about their secrets. Whether that's true or exaggerated, it paints a grim picture. The wife, understandably, developed significant issues as a result of the marriage. She turned to prescription drugs, which spiraled into addiction and ended up in rehab. Fortunately, she's doing much better now. To complicate things further, her husband racked up massive gambling debts, around $500,000, which her father ended up covering. This entire ordeal became a sort of soap opera in my family's social circle for years. My mom shared most of these details with me, including the surreal moment of hearing her use the word cock ring in a serious sentence. Thanks for that image, guy. Story 36. My cousin Tim has struggled with mental and psychological issues his whole life. The signs started showing when he was a child, though his parents only began seeking help when he was in high school. As kids, Tim was different. He choked his brother once, breaking the cartilage in his throat and leaving him unable to swallow properly for a while. Tim was still eating baby food until around the age of 7 and sucked his thumb well into our preteen years. He also carried around a mangled baby blanket and flapped his arms in ways that weren't typical for his age. He was aggressive toward me and my other cousins, but as kids I thought we were just roughhousing. Apparently I was the only one who fought back when he pushed too hard. When my family helped his parents move into a new house, my aunt, who is notoriously odd, told my mom to sort through their files. Among them were documents about conditions like Tourette's, autism, schizophrenia, OCD, and more. It started to make sense why Tim behaved the way he did. His parents, however, never talked openly about his struggles. Whenever anyone brought up Tim's issues, they would shut the conversation down. Even when approached by family members who were professionals in special education, nursing, or social work. Now, Tim is much more settled, though he's still working through some challenges. I've pieced together a lot from my conversations with him over the years, and everything fits the bigger picture. It's sad, though, that his family chose secrecy over seeking more support from people who genuinely cared and could have helped. Story 37. After my mom had been dating my dad for a while, one of his friends, who was also dating my mom's best friend at the time, hit on her. According to my mom, he came onto her with such arrogance, acting as if she had been waiting for him all along. She said no to his advances on multiple occasions. This guy turned out to be a serial cheater. He eventually left my mom's best friend for one of the women he had been seeing on the side, and they're now married with 2 kids. Oddly, my mom never told her best friend about his behavior. She was afraid her friend wouldn't believe her, and she definitely didn't tell my dad. She did, however, confide in me when I was relatively young, trusting me to keep the secret from my father. Luckily, my dad and this guy drifted apart before I was born. But when I was 14, I met him for the first time at a summer barbecue. I was introduced to him and didn't think much of it until I saw him greet my mom with a kiss on the lips. It was subtle, and I don't think my mom realized I saw it. It was shocking. My parents rarely kissed in front of me, despite being married for over 30 years. I confronted my mom later, and she brushed it off, saying she was caught off guard and found it rude. I'd like to believe her when she says she never slept with this guy. Otherwise, why tell me the story at all? Still, it stings when I hear my dad reminisce about their friendship. He has no idea about this melodrama, and it's incredibly tempting to tell him. But I hold back because it would tarnish his memories. And he doesn't need to question what happened 30 plus years ago. Story 38. My mom's side of the family is obsessed with secrets, and while I hate it, I've now stumbled across one of my own. A bit of backstory. My great-grandfather, my father's grandfather, had a mistress in a second family. This isn't a secret. Our family has known about it for years. The mistress had more children with him than my great-grandmother did. But the children from the mistress promised to keep it a secret from their own kids, to preserve Grandpa's memory. Several years ago, my now late aunt was at a horse show and met a man who shared our last name. It's a rare surname, an anglicized version of a French-Italian name, so most people who share it are related. She joked that he might be part of the illegitimate side of the family. When he told his mom the story, she confirmed it was true. Apparently, he's the only one among his siblings and cousins who knows about their family's secret. Fast forward to a few weeks ago, I was reading the comments on a large public Facebook post when I noticed a woman with our last name. Curious, I clicked on her profile. She didn't look like us, so I almost moved on. But I noticed her posts were directed towards someone who seemed close to her. This person had a different last name, and I eventually realized it was her daughter. After finding a few pictures of the daughter, I noticed she had features that were unmistakably part of our family. Then it clicked. The woman is married to someone with our last name, and the daughter's last name is different because she's married too. I haven't looked up the daughter's husband yet, but I'm tempted to. If he looks enough like us, I might reach out to confirm if they're related. I haven't told anyone in my family about this yet because I'm not sure, but part of me hopes I've found some long-lost relatives. The thought of connecting with them is exciting, though I'm cautious about what it might uncover.